Dr. Pepper, a water.
Coke.
Lila. Coke. Man. Anna, do you want to continue? No, I don't.
Okay. All right. It is Monday, March 10th, and I will call the Charter Review Commission to order. First up, roll call. Oh. Or I can do it.
Herval,
Here.
Ford,
Here.
Knight,
Here.
Walsh,
Here.
Glickler,
Here.
Kirkwood.
Here.
We've established a quorum. All right, moving on to item number 2, approval of minutes. Did everybody have a chance to review the minutes? Do we have any questions or comments or changes? Do I hear a motion?
Motion to accept.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Walsh and a second by Ms. Ford. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0. All right, moving on to item number 3, citizen comment. At this time, we will open up the meeting for any citizens that would like to speak. It's 6:32. All right. Hearing or seeing no citizens, I will close citizen comment. Moving on to section 4, consider and possible action. Consider approval of recommended changes to Articles 3, 4, and 5 of the city charter. I would like to go through these, if we could, one by one, so everybody understands exactly what the change is.
Okay.
Okay?
See if Jennifer's able to get them up on the screen. Just as a note, the reason that I reposted 3 is because I'm recommending one of the things that we had talked about in 4 go back to 3, so I'll have to slide up and down to show you that one.
I do have the headline.
See if we can get it to share. If we can get the red line up in the back. There we go. We can start with 4.03, Jennifer. It's the first one. I'm going to go back to it because I want to show you where I thought about it and then pull it back up to where I put it. So 4.03A, I want to note that my recommendation is that we hold off on this until next meeting because then we can talk about it with the section on finance. And I think those are kind of interrelated.
Well, Commissioner Knight.
The Director of Finance is not addressed in Article 8 by either who appoints them or who removes them. It's
Okay.
not there.
So you don't want to talk about them together with finance? We don't have to. I just thought it would be a place to talk about it.
Well, I think part of I'm not exactly sure what we're gonna do with it, but we've already addressed it in 2 places.
Director of Finance?
It's 3.05. We said that officers or employees appointed directly by the council, except for city manager, may be removed by majority vote of the council.
That doesn't apply to the finance director. He's currently not appointed by council. He's appointed by the city manager. The city manager, if he wanted to terminate the finance director, would have to get permission from council. That's the way the charter is currently written.
Oh, he can't be removed
Correct. without-
except on confirmation
Correct.
by
That's the way it's currently
the
written.
city council. So, we'll just put all of the stuff about the finance director in 8.
I don't know that we need to put it in 8. I just thought the last time we started talking about it, we were turning to 8, and 8's not posted, so I thought maybe we'd want to talk about them together, but it's really up to the board. That was just my suggestion.
But in this section is where we discuss what the council actually does. Is that correct?
Right, so I went ahead and drafted the 2 options that I think we talked about last time. But then I made a note that the last time, one of the commissioners, and I can't recall which one, wanted to go and talk about Article 8, and so I thought, well, if we want to talk about those together, we can do that. We would just post it that way. If we want to talk about them separately, we can do that too, however you want to do it.
I'm okay with talking about them separately,
Okay.
unless anybody else has any opinion about it. Commissioner Glicker.
Yeah, I think that we can talk about this aspect of it in this section. Oh, I glanced at section 8, and I don't see the need to have a concurrent conversation about it with section 8.
Okay, so what I drafted is option 1, which would require the 5 votes to confirm the dismissal of the finance director, or option 2, which would take the finance director out of A and put it in P. Those were the 2 options that I think we talked about. There was some side discussion on changing how he was appointed, but it wasn't clear if that was something that the commission wanted to do or not, so.
Are we in 3
Commissioner
or
Knight.
4?
4.03,
4.03.
A, currently.
So we went with an affirmative vote. So that affirmative vote on option 1 would be of the 5 members.
I changed it from majority to affirmative because it would require 5, and a majority would be 4.
Right.
So that was why I changed that. I didn't get a feel for a consensus at the last meeting, which is why I drafted it both ways, so that you could look at it and talk about it.
Commissioner Knight.
I believe the director of finance is an extremely important position. And either the appointment or removal of the finance director should be 5 votes, same as city manager.
Any other thoughts?
I agree. I think option 1 is the best.
It sounded like Ms. Knight wanted to add appointment in there, is that correct?
Yes. Actually, option 1, appoint, supervise, and remove the city manager and the director of finance. Oh, I forgot my and confirm.
No, because
Director-
you wouldn't need the confirm, it would just be and director of
Yeah.
finance at that point.
By a vote of at least 5 members.
So the city council would appoint the finance director?
Yes.
That's what she's suggesting is.
All right. Anybody else have any thoughts?
But that's already lined out elsewhere in here that, no?
Not the finance director.
No.
Huh. I thought
The
that
finance
said, I
director-
thought we established somewhere that the city manager appointed the finance director.
Correct. Currently, the city manager appoints the finance director, but cannot terminate the finance director without confirmation from council. That's the current charter. It's not laid out anywhere, it's just because it doesn't say council appoints him, the city manager does. Because the city manager appoints all department heads unless otherwise
Okay,
noted.
thank you.
And that's.
Mr. Glicker?
Thank you. And that's where we refer to 8.01, because that establishes that the finance manager is the head of the Department of Finance. And the code.
And then in Article 7, it talks about how the city manager appoints the department directors.
So that's why we ended up getting to Article 8 in the first place.
So we would be changing it from the city manager appointing the finance director to the city council, finding and appointing.
It sounds like as Ms. Knight has proposed it, the finance director would be fully separate. He or she would be appointed, supervised, and removed by council, which means he or she would report directly to city council. City council would do the performance review. City council would do everything on that.
Yeah, I have a
person.
problem with that.
That's the way it was stated, unless I heard it wrong.
I don't like the idea of the city council being responsible for that. I mean, that's the reason we have the city manager form of government. And, you know, there are qualifications, we're gonna get into in a little while, for being a city manager. There aren't any qualifications for being on city council, and I'm concerned that it's an important enough job that it should be somebody. I don't have a problem with them approving the appointment per se, but I don't think it should be completely independent of the city manager.
Commissioner Knight.
We've had issues in the past with the city manager that told the finance director to do things that the council were not aware of. And it became a very large issue when it resulted in massive layoffs because the city was almost broke. And I think our city council is savvy enough to be able to read a budget, approve a budget, and deal with financial issues. If they can't, they probably shouldn't be sitting up here.
I'm going to make a note about one kind of complication about doing it the way you're proposing. I'm not suggesting that you guys do something because I said so. I'd just like to play devil's advocate so you know what's coming. The charter provides that the city manager presents the budget. So if the finance director and the city manager are wholly separate, what happens if they disagree about what should go in the budget? Who makes the final call? Who presents it to council at that point?
Well, that's just a presentation. The city council makes the final call.
That's correct, but the city manager sets what's recommended currently. And so if you change it and the finance director and the city manager disagree, do they present competing budgets at that point? Does the finance director have the ability to overrule the city manager's determination on what should be recommended in the budget?
Well, we could play devil's advocate and go the other way, right?
I know, but when somebody's arguing one way, this is what I've been doing since I've been standing here, is I'm playing devil's advocate going the other way without necessarily expressing my opinion because I like to find holes so that we can avoid having holes at the end of the day.
Well, it's just like if you do not agree with the city manager, who ends up being the final say?
The only power I have is the word no, and that's what I like to say.
You only have what?
The only power I have is the word no. If I tell you it's not legal, you can still do it, but typically people don't. It's the only power I have.
Okay.
You have the power of the law.
Yes, that's just the way I describe that. That doesn't mean that city council or the city manager has to listen to me. If I say it's illegal and they choose not to follow it, I've given them the advice. I give advice. I don't make decisions.
Commissioner Ford, did you have a comment?
I'm in favor of having multiple, because this is such an important position, having multiple consciences on the position rather than putting it in one person's control. It seems a little more democratic that way.
Checks and balances.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So then maybe the council would be involved in appointing the city finance?
Like confirming the appointment,
Confirming-
I think is what you had said
confirming
earlier.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that city manager makes the
finds them,
recommendation.
And then the council confirms it?
Commissioner Glicker.
I think what you're getting at, and I agree with, is that if we amended A to say, appoint, supervise, and remove the city manager, and appoint and confirm
Appointment and dismissal of.
confirm appointment and dismissal of the director of finance. I think that would be a better, there's your oversight, where at the same time, we're not putting the entire onus on the city council.
With 5 votes?
Yeah, that's
Sure.
fine. So it'd be kind of more like a cabinet position in the federal government. President recommends, Senate appoints, or Senate confirms.
Yeah, I think that's a better route with our form of government.
I mean, 2010, we had a finance director go rogue. I'll say it. And so, and the city manager, you know, we came very close to having a forensic audit. That's how bad it was. So I don't ever want the city of Kyle to be in that position again. So if you guys think that this is going to accomplish that, but I think there needs to be dual control. I get that there has to be one head, not dueling chiefs.
Just a question about that. Okay, so the finance director went rogue.
He just picked up and left.
Oh, really?
When the council terminated the city manager, next day he walked out.
Again, this would not prevent that because any employee is allowed to resign.
But that's.
So he would still be allowed, even if we changed all of this language, he would still be allowed to resign.
Right.
He
But
didn't resign.
He
Okay.
didn't resign?
No, he just walked out.
Yeah, we just walked out. So,
We have a policy, if you miss enough days, you resign, but I understand what you're saying.
Commissioner Glicker.
I think that in the grand scheme of things, I understand, and I was living here too then, but in 2010 and today, we have a very different world. We have a very different Kyle. We have a very different population. I think we have a savvier population. We have a lot more transparency. As an example, in 2010, I wasn't even on Facebook. And I think there's a lot more eyes on what happens now. And I think if we water down the city manager position too much, we're undermining our entire charter. If we give the city council the opportunity to approve the appointment as well as the dismissal by 5 votes, I think we've got some checks and balances. But I mean, at the end of the day, there's got to be one person in charge of the government, and our charter says it's the city manager. We can't address for every contingency, but we can use the past as a guide. But I don't think that kind of situation is necessarily to be repeated under the way we're living in Kyle now. In
I
many
think
facets.
we're seeing it right now. On a national level. It can happen.
I'm still not getting a majority. Do we want to try to take a vote on one of these options?
Maybe we need to think about it a little bit.
Or we can put it back on next meeting and we can talk about it some more.
And I'd just ask that one of the options be add the appointment and.
We can write up the third option and
Okay.
put it in.
Oh,
Should put it
okay.
in there, and I'll put it in the,
I don't think
when we
that
post this
the
time.
city council should be out there looking for our finance director. I think that the city manager should be doing that. So I don't mind the confirm appointment and dismissal
Yeah, I mean, if we.
by a vote of 5. Because again, it's important.
I feel like I'm seeing 3 and 3, so I don't know if somebody wants to make a motion or if we want to bring this back next meeting and maybe have some time to think on it.
Want to think about it?
I'm not gonna change my position. I'm not in favor of the city council appointing and being in charge. I'm not.
Let me throw one more thing out there. The city manager is a highly paid, full-time position for the city. Council members are not full-time members. And this is such an important responsibility that I wouldn't want it to be on somebody's not necessarily front burner. Is if we have to find a finance director, and you've got city council members who have jobs. One of ours right now is in law enforcement in Austin. And I just think that's too important of a position to be the responsibility of, you know, our part-time council members when there's a full-time, highly paid individual available to do that portion of the job. So
We'll try this then. I move that we accept option 1 as currently printed on our screen.
So that's with confirmation of appointment and dismissal of.
Yeah.
Commissioner,
Clarification on that. So, you're okay with 5 votes for dismissal of the Director of Finance?
That's more than a simple majority, yeah.
Okay.
That's more than a simple majority.
do I hear a second?
I second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Nay.
No.
Motion passes 4-2.
4-2. Mhm.
All right, that brings us to 4.03F. I think I just kind of took a shot at trying to clean this up after my conversation with Ms. Knight last meeting. Trying to explain that city council will provide for the boards and commissions, but without getting into all the details of recommendations coming in and how that works. Any thoughts on that one?
I move we accept that.
I'll second that.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, because we
Aye.
resolved it in 4.03, we can skip, 4.03A, we can skip P, 'cause that's already been resolved. That takes us to R. R was the one that was really lengthy, and we were trying to cut it, and I took a shot at that, and I don't know if I got your intent or not, so let me know.
I move to accept R.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Guys, okay? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Motion passes 6-0.
Okay. 4.04, duties and officers of employees, duties of officers and employees. This is the one where we talked about how technically the way it's written, the council could change the job duties of a single employee. And so I tried to remove language that would let the council be involved in the duties and responsibilities of a specific employee versus, say, an appointed officer.
I move to accept.
Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Okay, that's it.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, motion passes 6-0.
Next one is 4.06C.
Point of clarification,
Yes.
caught another I believe I caught another typo. Should that say calling for?
No, it should say calling or canvassing. So
Okay.
you call an election, and then at the end of the election, you canvass the election.
Okay.
Personally, I believe both should be able to be done on a single reading, particularly in the case of a runoff election, where we know who the candidates are going to be, and we may or may not have 7 people to vote on it, so we'd have to bring it back twice if we wanted to do it as an ordinance.
Can I ask a question? Would that allow for the runoff to actually be moved up a little bit, or?
That's set by state law now, which is, it used to be that the cities could choose any Saturday, or any, I can't remember, what it was. We had a lot more choice on when it could be during that time frame, and now it's on the Saturday set by the Secretary of State. This one was difficult, we canvassed on December 23rd.
It was.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on that one? All right. Moving to 4.06, right?
4.06C, and then G was just changing that word published to posted, which I think we talked about.
Everybody okay with the changes to C and G?
I move we accept them.
I second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, the motion passes 6.0.
4.07 was a bit of a conversation, I think, last time, talking about emergency ordinances. I went and dug through state law on emergency powers of cities. It has a lot of information about emergency declarations or calling of emergency meetings, but not so much about which ordinance can be passed on a single reading and which ordinances cannot for purposes of an emergency. And so my suggestion was basically that we can adopt emergency ordinances. They can't involve rates, fees, or taxes, or any of those things. and they would require a supermajority of 5 votes, so that it wouldn't have to be 7 in the event of an actual emergency.
Okay, but nowhere does it define emergency, is that correct?
That is correct. If you'd like to define emergency, we can do that.
Commissioner Knight?
Could we just add in compliance with state law?
That was the suggestion that we got out of the last meeting. State law has a lot of stuff about emergency declarations, so is the suggestion that they could only do it when they could do an emergency declaration? Or would there be other examples of an emergency that might not be emergency declaration related, such as we have a accident at a city facility, we lose access to a building that we need access? That's not gonna really be an emergency declaration, but it might be something we wanna fix quickly.
What about,
Commissioner Glicker?
what about something to the effect of, so long as it doesn't violate state law?
Yeah, we can put that in. I don't know if we wanna try to define emergency. This says affecting life, health, property, the public peace, or to prevent material financial loss of the city. So that's kind of that's as close to a definition as it gets to emergency. I don't know if we wanna add something to make that more clear.
I don't know what other wording we would add to clarify what emergency means without getting into the weeds of all the different various emergencies that might possibly happen. I feel like this definition will suffice.
I agree.
Well,
I agree.
In Texas, we could have an abnormal emergency, meaning geared or pointed towards water, that may not affect other,
It would affect health and property.
okay. All right. So, we good as it's stated? Do I hear a motion to approve?
Motion to approve section as stated.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay, motion by Commissioner Ford, and seconded by Commissioner Kirkwood. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
4.08 was a title. We changed the title resolutions and minute orders to resolutions and motions.
okay. Do I hear a motion to approve that?
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 All right.
Section 5.02, general elections. We changed held annually on the Tuesday in November, blah, 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 to the uniform election date in November. So when the election's held, and then we deleted B, and that's where there was some talk about putting in B which offices are elected together. My suggestion is that that might be better in 3.01, where it defines what the offices are, to then show which ones are together. So that's what I have suggested here, is to go back up to 3.01
Yeah,
and add which ones are elected together. So places 1 and 3 shall be elected in the same year. The mayor, places 2 and 4 shall be elected in the same year, and places 5 and 6 shall be elected in the same year. Without necessarily naming the year, because once we name the year, it gets outdated.
I move to accept 3.01 and 5.02 as presented.
do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Passes 6-0.
Okay, 5.04, conduct of elections. We've cut that basically to say it'll be held in compliance with state law and city ordinances.
Do I hear a motion to approve the change to 5.04?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
5.06, again, is trying to remove some language that we thought was maybe superfluous, and then require that at least one city-owned facility be a polling place for all city elections. So that doesn't necessarily have to be City Hall, but it does have to be a city facility.
I move that we adopt this change.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay,
And 5.07, A and D, both of which we're again trying to remove, where there's a lot of language, and just limit it to in accordance with state law. I did check on the candidates with the same surnames or similar surnames, And the state law offers a couple different ways to distinguish them, not just their home address. And so I feel like it's better to just leave it as in accordance with state law.
Move to accept 5.07.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes.
5.08, I added that only the voters that live within the boundary of places 2, 4, and 6 can vote for places 2, 4, and 6, because it's not specifically spelled out, although we all know that that's the way it works.
Did we do 5.07 A and D?
A and D, yes.
Oh, okay.
That's 5.08 was just to make it abundantly clear that for the single-member districts, you have to live in their district to vote for them.
Do I hear a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Nay.
That was 5-1.
I just don't know what they're gonna do with redistricting.
Okay.
I'm good with it, really.
And then 5.12, term of office, where it had all that language about which Tuesday the people went into office, if it was after the regular election where they had a majority vote, or the runoff where they had a majority vote. I tried to cut it to just say their term starts the first Tuesday following the canvass of the election where they had the general vote, whether that's, or where they're declared election, because in the case of a runoff ending in a tie, you don't ever get the majority vote, but you do get declared elected by, say, drawing straws or whatever the process is that you follow, which happened in my previous city this year. So apparently these things actually happen.
Do I-
They drew straws.
They drew lots, yeah, they
Wow.
rolled dice, basically.
Commissioner Knight,
I move to recommend this change.
do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion passes 6-0.
And that's everything I have on 3, 4, and 5.
All right. Moving on to section 6.
This is item number 3.
Do you want to go back to the presentation?
Yeah. Okay. All right, item number 3, we have discussion on Articles 6 and 7.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This will let me switch, this will not let me switch slides.
What did I do with the agenda? Okay.
Is that not on? Maybe it's not on. That's what I was thinking. All right, there we go. Article 6, these are the various sections that are in Article 6. There's enough of them that it's on 2 slides. And you can see I've recommended talking about quite a few of them. Article 6 is meaty. The first one I've recommended talking about is 6.02. If anyone has any comments on 6.01, please bring that up first. But it's pretty short, so probably not.
No. All right, moving on to section 6.02 and 6.03.
6.02 and 6.03 I wanted to talk about together because they both have lists of things to which they don't apply, and they're very similar, but they're not quite exactly the same. And so I don't know if we want, if we like it that way, if we want to change it, or if there are any other exceptions we want to add or some we want to remove. I just want to bring it up to your attention.
Commissioner Knight.
I'm just wondering how these exceptions were originally decided. Is this a state law thing, or?
My guess would be a lot of these would be, like, you can't change the tax rate by initiative. That would make a lot of sense, because the tax rate is supposed to be based on the budget, and if you can't change you have to change them together. The budget is very, specific to what the city's doing, and so if you try to change the budget, you could have just colossal impacts across the entire organization by just changing one little thing by initiative, and so that it was set to be taken out, I assume intentionally, to avoid that sort of thing. And then similarly, like, rates have to be set by city council. That's another one of those that, like, your water rates have to cover the cost of water. So if the residents wanted to do an initiative petition to lower your water rates, while I'm sure as residents, everybody agrees that that would be wonderful, it wouldn't cover the cost of the water, and then they may or may not be able to get water.
Commissioner Knight.
What about zoning and annexation? I know annexation is controlled by state law.
Annexation is controlled by state law. Zoning is also controlled by state law quite heavily.
Commissioner Knight.
Sorry. It says the people of the city shall have the power under both 6.02 and 6.03. But when you get into the nuts and bolts, it's really only the registered voters.
That is correct.
So why does it say citizens here, the people of the city? The people of the city are like, your child can vote, right? Has that power.
Right, I understand. I think we use people, citizens, residents. They're used pretty similarly. But I understand what you're saying. If you want to change it to registered voters, you can do that. It's pretty clear that for the signatures, they have to be registered voters.
No, in terms of the wording, to me, it looks like, except legislation appropriating money kind of covers everything to do with budget, expenditures, and levy of taxes and bonds. That simple phrase covers the same thing, right?
Right.
Certificate, that's the obligation, yeah. So that whole phrase, that whole section in there from shall not extend to the budget, and it could be replaced, is to extend to the budget all the way down to obligations could be replaced by legislation appropriating money, could it? Or is that too much to try and put under that?
I think that might be why those changes are intentional, that you're pointing that out, why the differences are intentional, is that if you can't have an initiative to appropriate money because there might not be money to appropriate, but you could in theory have a referendum to remove the appropriation of money so long as it wasn't related to a capital expenditure or the budget, although typically appropriation of money is in the budget, but maybe not always.
Okay. Yeah, I can see the difference there. Okay, thank you.
At least maybe that was the thought process at the time. I'm not sure that it's a distinction with much of a difference, but it could have just that much of a difference.
Well, yeah.
I don't see
Commissioner
anything,
Knight.
oh, I'm sorry.
Commissioner Ford.
I don't see anything glaringly obvious about 2 or 3 that needs changes.
Commissioner Knight.
I just have a question. Under referendum, it does not include capital expenditures. But under an initiative, the citizens could initiate capital expenditures? Like, I want a new road?
That would in all likelihood require appropriating money, which would prohibit them from doing it.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm okay with leaving 6.02 and 6.03 like they are.
I agree with Commissioner Ford as well.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay.
6.04 just doesn't specifically reference federal law. I don't know that it has to, but I find it weird that it doesn't, because it represents, it says it can't be in conflict with the charter, the Constitution, or any state law, but it doesn't specifically say federal law or whether the Constitution refers to the U.S. Constitution or the state Constitution, or both. Again, I don't know that it has to. Federal law applies anyway.
Couldn't hurt to add
Yeah.
federal law, just in case.
Any state or federal statute,
Yeah, I just found it odd that it wasn't there.
yeah.
Okay, so we'll just add any state or federal statute. Okay. 6.05.
Signatures. So there's a potential for conflict here in a very rare circumstance, but again, I like finding holes and trying to clog them. So in the very rare circumstance that we have this happen in the year that places 1 and 3 are both up for election, which is this year. So if we got an initiative or referendum next year, which one would control? Because if 1 and 3 got a different number of total votes, would it be the higher number or the lower number? And so I want to clarify that, because what it says is 25% of the votes cast in last general election.
Commissioner Knight.
Isn't a general election different from a runoff election?
It is, but if 1 and 3 are running at the same time and both are at large, right? Because what we did when we got the initiative this current year was we looked at the mayor, because he was the only at-large position that ran. So we used that one. But if 2 at-large positions run and one of them gets, say, 10,000 votes and the other one gets, say, 15,000 votes total because 5,000 people chose not to vote in the other one, which one would we use? And so I wanted to set it to the one that gets the largest total votes. It could be the smallest total votes of an at-large position.
Commissioner Knight.
There's a difference between initiative and referendum petitions and recall petitions.
Yes, there is. We'll talk about recall next.
Well, but I think this is important. It's 25% of the number of votes cast at the last general election.
Right.
But recall is 15% of the total registered voters.
That is correct.
It really should be consistent.
I don't know if it was intentionally inconsistent or not.
It was. It
Okay.
was changed. Originally, it was 25% of the number of votes cast at the last general election. And after the unpopular recall of Mayor Atkins, it was changed.
My guess is that 15% of the registered voters is generally going to be higher than 25% of the votes actually cast.
15% of registered voters.
Isn't there like 30,000 registered voters?
30-something. I can't remember the exact number, but
Commissioner
30-something.
Ford.
I have a clarifying question. There's a lot of language in here about registered voters and citizens, and I know we covered registered voters. How does this apply to folks in the unincorporated areas?
You have to be a registered voter within city limits.
Within city limits, so nobody living in Six Creeks could petition for anything.
No, they're not allowed to vote in Kyle. They don't pay taxes in Kyle. Therefore, they're not allowed to vote here.
Even with the Kyle address.
Even with the address is really based on where your post office is more than anything. Post office sets addresses.
Got it, thank you.
Commissioner Glick.
First off, I think that recall should be a higher number and a harder hurdle than initiative and referendum. That said, to devil's advocate back at you, Amy, the 25% of the number of votes cast at the last general election of the city, in your hypothetical, one at-large candidate gets, that gets 15, there's 15,000 votes in one. The other one, there's 10,000 votes. No, there are 15,000 votes. It's just 5,000 are undervotes. The same number of people have gone to the polls.
We're
and-
choosing to leave it blank,
Right.
Right.
right?
So,
So
but,
the results we would get would only list the people who voted usually on the official votes.
well, but the Secretary of State number would tell us what the number of
Yeah.
voters was. And I think we'd end up actually opening a can of worms by changing it, because that's how, I mean, to me, it reads naturally that way.
And then the only other question I have, because I've already said I interpreted this as the at-large position when we had our petition last year, because
Right.
it made more sense than basing on one of the single-member districts. Doesn't technically say that. I think it should at least say at-large position.
Commissioner Knight.
I went over some of the total votes. In 2020, there were 17,808 some odd that voted. In 2021, there was 1,777 votes, and this is the general election.
Yes,
And then in 2022, it was 10,700. 2023 is 4,134. and then it's back up, and it coincides, the rise and fall coincides with presidential elections, midterms,
Yep.
and no national elections.
What you're saying quite clearly is that if you want to do an initiative petition, you should time it accordingly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
You can game this system the way it's written.
Yes, you can.
Which
Which may or may not be
might
intentional.
work out.
It's not illegal. If it's the way we want to do it, that's the way we want to do it. But I do agree with that is very clear. If you do it on an off year,
And,
or the year following an off year, you have a much lower threshold.
and I looked at, generally, 15% of registered voters, and this is a guess, is around 4,891 signatures. 25% of the presidential years is 3,773. They're not too far off the mark.
They're not, but they're quite off the mark on the off years.
Oh, yeah, in like a non-presidential, non-midterm, 25% would be 1,033.
Yeah. Which is very different than 4,000. And I don't remember what the rest of those numbers were, but
Yeah.
it is quite different.
But, you know, we
But
can
maybe
let them
that's
game the
intentional.
system, I don't care.
Maybe it's intentional. I have to assume it is, and I don't mind that. I just want to make sure it's clear how that's determined so that we don't end up in litigation if we interpret it wrong.
Commissioner Glick.
I actually have thought about that, which is if you use the off-year numbers, it should be easier to get it on the ballot. But then when it's on the ballot, it's a presidential election when more people are out. So you can take less people to get something on the ballot, but then have more people get it into consideration, which I don't have any problem with.
But you could do it you could start it during a presidential, right before. It can still be gamed.
There's always ways to game it.
And originally, the original charter, both the initiative referendum and the recall were exactly the same.
25% of the votes cast or 15% of the registered
I think it
voters?
was votes cast.
Okay. It doesn't look like 6.05's changed.
Right, but the other one has, and that's 6.11.
That one doesn't show either, so I don't know.
All right, well, I'm just gonna ask a question because I'm really confused. So, in your example, 1 and 3 are running. Why wouldn't it be the total number of votes that were cast for both? I can only vote for one person when I come to the
No,
vote.
you can vote for both. They're both at large.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So every resident of the city of Kyle who's a registered voter can
At
vote for
large.
both place
You can
1 and
vote
place
for
3 in November,
Oh, because it's the two, okay, that's where I was.
because they're
gonna
both
say.
at large.
Okay.
And that's
gotcha.
the only year, that's the only time that there's 2 at large. So in all the rest of the cycles, there's 1 at large. On
So-
that cycle, there's 2.
so that begs the question, is it fair for the single-member districts?
I'm not sure what your question is. On the
Well-
recall, we'll get to that, and I agree that the recall being the same for everybody is something that we need to talk about. That's later
Okay.
in this presentation.
Okay.
If we're comfortable leaving it the same, that's fine.
I'm comfortable with 6.05.
I am too.
Okay.
I am not, but
Okay. Anybody else not comfortable with it?
Okay, 6.06, 6.07, and 6.09 I talked about all together because this is the process. We had a petition for an initiative in 2024, so I got to live this process, and it is very different than the process I got to live, or for referendum, sorry, not an initiative. It's very different than the process I got to live with an initiative in my last city. And I noted that and found it odd. Because if you look at the process, the petitioner brings the form of the petition to the vote to be filed. They have 90 days to circulate the petition. The city secretary validates the signatures. And then at that point, we get a legal opinion as to whether or not that ordinance is legal in the first place. My last city did it the other way. They filed the petition, city attorney gave an opinion as to whether or not it would be a legal ordinance, and that was the end. And then they wouldn't spend the time getting 4,000 signatures and then find out, oh, sorry, that's not legal, we can't pass it anyway.
Oh,
So I found this process odd.
I agree.
Let's do it the
Yeah.
second way. I like the more efficient way.
yeah.
I have a question.
Commissioner Glick.
What's the process if the citizen or citizens who wish to pursue this disagree with the city attorney's opinion?
Well, then they have to get the signatures still. So they haven't already gotten the signatures. So you're less likely to get litigation before they've gotten the signatures than after they've gotten the signatures. If they go get them all and then you say, oh, sorry, we're not putting it on the ballot because it's illegal, that's just begging for a lawsuit. If you do it before, then it's whether or not they can get the signatures.
And we did that before.
We've done that before, exactly that way.
It was on recall, but
Yeah. The way the charter was written in my last city was someone would give us the subject of an initiative, and then the city attorney's office would draft it in legal form. And if there was something in the subject that couldn't be legal, then we would leave that out and explain why. And then that way, the ordinance is drafted in the form that kind of council's more used to anyway, instead of drafted by the person who comes up with it.
I feel like even whoever is going around asking for the petition would appreciate the fact that their time would not be wasted.
That was my thought.
Commissioner Knight.
I do have a question. Oh, it's on 6.06, sorry.
We're talking about 6.06, so go ahead.
Oh, it says that the petition has to have a full copy of the initiative ordinance.
Correct.
That can be long.
It can be. Typically, the way you see that is the petition will have, each person who's circulating the petition will have a copy and a whole lot of signature pages behind it. So it's not like each signature has the full ordinance and then there's a signature.
Okay.
But here's a copy and here's a signature page. But that way, anyone who signs the petition is able to read the entire ordinance before they sign it if they would like to.
Which they rarely do.
Commissioner Glicker.
Do you have proposed language tonight, or are you asking us to approve you to submit proposed language at the next
I'll
meeting?
put it together at the next meeting if we want to change this process. I'm not quite sure how to do it yet, but we'll get there.
I think we'd all be interested in at least seeing what the alternative would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else on 6.06, 07, or 09? If anyone else sees. And I skipped 6.08, so if anyone saw something on that, please let
I
me
have
know.
one question I'd put down here. Have we ever run into a situation where somebody wanted to submit something where it was too close to the election to do this process? What did? They just shove it off to the next election?
It was awfully close this past summer when we were looking at it, that if they'd gotten the signatures, it may not have been able to make the ballot by the time we finished all of the reviews. That is what would happen. If it was past the deadline to make the ballot, it's going to have to wait till the next time it can go on a ballot.
Okay.
All right, we're on section 6.10.
6.10,
Wait,
Commissioner Knight, I'm sorry.
under 6.07, it says the city secretary has 14 days following the date it's turned in. Are those business days, or are those, so it includes weekends?
that's days. It's the way it's
So
written
it's
is
really
days.
10 business days.
Correct.
I think that needs to be clarified. And also, I would like to ask the city secretary if that's sufficient time.
I couldn't hear the question.
Is 14 days sufficient time to review the signature pages of a petition?
I couldn't do it by myself. I had to have a team. So it was a team of 4 or 5 people.
There were 4 of us, Jennifer's staff, myself, that reviewed it.
Would 15 business days be a little better?
Now, with the 4 staff, we reviewed it in about a week, about 1 week with 4 staff, but without that, it's gonna, like, if it was actually supposed to just be Jennifer by herself, multiply our week by 4, right? Because she's 1 person versus 4 people.
And that would mean that I can't work on anything else during that time, you know?
Yeah.
So I think it's reasonable if you have a team. I've seen other city secretaries where they've had to call in city secretaries from neighboring, their association to come and help because maybe they're the only ones, But it's definitely a process, and we set a process for each person to follow the same process and guidelines, and that's how we do it.
So, but I think we should say business days
Okay.
to
That seems
clarify
reasonable.
that, so that they don't have to work on weekends.
And then we would also give, I assume we would then also give the person who's recirculating 14 business days to get it signed, and then 7 business
Exactly.
days to review those changes. Okay.
So
Commissioner Walsh.
I addressed this with Jennifer, and I came up with a question, could we add "and designees," city secretary and designees?
I don't know that that's necessary, but yes, we can.
Just to make sure nobody ever gripes that she
Yeah.
pulled somebody in to help her
Yeah.
and they didn't do something exactly the same.
I mean, I know Jennifer pretty well, and I'm quite sure she checked all of us to make sure we were
I
wrong.
believe it, I believe it, but I just thought I'd, really kind of, just thought we might make it certain that nobody ever had any question about it.
That's probably a reasonable change as well, city secretary and/or designees.
Let me just add that if we're gonna go to business days, I don't have a problem with it being 15 days. I
Okay.
mean, 14 business days is a weird count, but 15 business days is 3 weeks.
Yeah.
That makes sense. We can do that. I just want to make sure that whatever change we're making to the city secretary's time, we're also making to the petitioner's time so that it's not getting accused of being too favorable to the city. We want to be fair.
When this was first written, we didn't have many people in town.
Didn't have one?
We didn't have many people in town.
This
Gotcha.
was probably first written around the time we had 5,000, because that's when you're allowed to get a
Yeah.
charter.
Were you born yet?
But when the charter was written, yes. yes,
Oh,
it
okay.
was.
All right. Everybody good with section 6.07?
And then was there anything else on 6.08 or 6.09?
Nope.
Oh, I have one on 609.
Okay, Commissioner Knight.
The action on petition. Council has 30 days to request an attorney's opinion.
That's the part we're changing. We're going to move that to
Okay.
earlier.
And then another 45 days to consider one of 3 options.
It actually looks like it says if the city attorney doesn't issue it. I can't tell if it's 45 days total or 30 plus 45, to be perfectly honest.
Yeah, I think that needs to be,
Yeah, I would've,
But I think we can fix that by moving the city attorney review higher so that it'll be a clear 45
Okay.
days. And then they have the 3 options on a referendum. But it's really only 2 options, right? Because you can't, it's adopt the initiative, repeal the referred ordinance, or put it on the ballot. So it's really 2 options. You either do what the voters, what the petition asks you to do, or you put it on the ballot.
Commissioner Knight.
so if the city attorney is going to give an opinion on the petition before the signatures are gathered, which I think is a good idea, and then the city attorney is supposed to issue a written opinion. Does that happen? That has to happen after the signatures, correct?
No, we would do that, we could do it either way. We could move it so that it's a public written opinion if that's what we want. I'm capable of writing public opinions. I don't do it very often, but I'm capable of it. So we could do a public written opinion at the beginning saying this is why doing this initiative would be illegal, or why this referendum doesn't comply with the charter would basically be the only reason that it would be a problem on the referendum would be if it was for one of those excluded categories.
Uh-huh.
Typically, because otherwise you can usually refer an ordinance, except potentially if it's like an expenditure and we're already under contract, and then we have an issue where we get sued if we, so there might be a couple issues where it'd be a problem for an referred ordinance. So we can
So-
give a written opinion on that at the beginning,
Right.
and then the petitioner can decide if they still want to try to get the signatures, although at the end of the day, if it's illegal, we're not going to be required to put it on a ballot because we can't put something illegal on a ballot. I've seen cities do that, and typically before the election, the attorney general is suing them. So,
I don't understand, okay, so if we
Answer my question.
put all of that in the, pre-petition, why does council need 45 days? That's a
would-
long time.
it could be a shorter time. I think you want more than one meeting so that they have time to see it and think about it.
Okay,
And so they're not being forced to make a decision on the fly at the first meeting, because then you're going to get some snap judgments one way or the other. But it could be, within the next 2 regular council meetings or next 3 regular council meetings, something like that, as opposed to a number of days.
I like that language better.
When I read it, it looked to me like the 30-day clock and a 45-day clock started at the same time.
They
Yeah.
do, yeah. The way I read it is.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, I read it, the first time I read it, I thought the 45-day clock and the 30-day clock were the same, and then I understood how she could read it the other way, so I think it's probably not clear.
Yeah, the word otherwise is the key there.
Well, and you're gonna present a proposal for different language for all of this together at the next meeting, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And that gets us to 6.10, 6.10. So one of the things I pointed out was that if you put an initiative on the ballot and it passes, council can't repeal that initiative for 2 years. There's no specific language limiting the time period to bring another initiative petition. And then the referendum is the other way. If a referendum fails an election, then it can't be referred again for 12 months, but there's no specific language on if or when council could pass a substantially similar ordinance. And so I don't know if that's intentional, it might be. First I pointed out that it's different times. One of them's 2 years and one of them's 12 months. And I don't know if that's the right way for it to be or not. And then the fact that it doesn't go the other way. It's just interesting. It might be intentional.
Well, I would read it to, I would see it that, you know, on the one hand, the initiative, you're trying to propose something new. And if you fail at it one way, maybe you come at it another way, and there shouldn't be as much of a limitation, whereas with the referendum, you're trying to get something undone. And if you fail at getting it undone, then there should be a waiting period before trying to undo it again. That's the sense that I would make of it. And I don't have a problem with that.
It's reasonable, and it makes sense that that was intentional. I just want to make sure that that's still the way we want to go. Sounds like we're okay. We'll move on. Power of recall. This one I think is really important to talk about because it has the same rules for at-large members as it does for single-member districts, which means, and I have checked, this has not actually happened, but theoretically, if the people who live in District 4 and District 6 really hate the District 2 representative, they could recall him even though they can't vote for him. And that seems wrong to me.
No, actually, it's just 15% of everyone in the city,
Right.
regardless of whether,
Whether they live in that district or not. Typically, you would see.
I think for single-member districts, only people living in that particular district should be able to.
Right. Typically, you'll see 15% of the registered voters who are eligible to vote for this
Right.
place. So that then if it gives them a smaller number of people too, so in that sense, it kind of hurts them, but at least it requires them to be people who actually could vote for them.
Yes, I agree.
Question, do we know the number of registered voters by district?
We will when we're done redistricting, but right this minute, no. In theory, they should be approximately equal to the best of our ability. No more than,
The elections office knows it because they code them.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could get it. It just, it won't be the same next time we elect someone who's in a single member district because we're redistricting right now.
Commissioner Walsh.
I saw something online recently about some proposed changes to the borders of the districts for the
That's
single
yeah,
members.
redistricting.
Okay, so is that happening right now? I thought that couldn't happen again until 2020.
You can redistrict at any time.
Okay,
You typically use the numbers from the census because they're the most reliable ones you have that look at things like racial makeup
right.
of the population. Whereas we might have some information that suggests that, hey, these numbers are thoroughly off because we've grown a lot. We're not going to be able to look at the racial makeup from those numbers. That said, when sometime last year, a council member put on the agenda to look at it, we looked at it, we think we need to redistrict because we're a little bit off. So we're working on it right now.
Yeah, that's what I remember, okay.
Commissioner Glicker.
I would propose something to the effect of 15% of the number of registered voters within the district served by the elected city officer.
Yep.
But how does that address at large?
Their
That-
district's the whole city.
Their district's the whole city.
Oh, okay.
With the district served by that, and you go back to the top line, elected city officer. So
Okay.
the mayor and the at-larges would know that it's all of us, and then the single-member districts would know that it's their district.
I like that.
Seems like a simple fix.
Any other comments? Okay.
I skipped 6.12, if anybody had any comments on that. It basically says is you use the same process to review the petitions as you do with an initiative or recall, so it's the same number of days, back and forth. And then I pointed out 6.13, limitations on recall. My guess is what this is intended to say is that no officer shall be subjected to more than 3 recall elections during a single term of office. I believe that's what it's intended to say. I'm going to point out that that's highly unlikely because of the amount of time it takes to do a recall in a 3-year term to get it done 3 years, especially when you can't do it within 6 months after they're elected or within 3 months of the new election. But I think that's what it's intended to say. I don't know if that's still what we want it to do or not. I could also see someone trying to argue that it's 3 times period because it says during their term of office. But
Yeah,
I think it's pretty clear it's a single term of office.
When I looked at that, I just kind of gave the numbers and I said, well, okay, you gotta have 6 months between the recall petitions is what I think we should do. Something to that effect. At least that'll slow them down. I don't know if it'll hurt them, but I mean, one right after the other would be ridiculous to me. So they fail the first time, they put another one in. So give them some time to cool off or get madder.
I think 3 in 1 term is too many.
3 in 1 term seems impossible to me. I can't figure out logistically how you would do that.
Well, so they're 36-month term, right? You can't do it for the first 6 months or the last 3, so now you're down to 27 months. And that would be 1 every 9 months, which is logistically impossible.
I mean, it's theoretically possible, but I just can't imagine how it would happen.
I think if you survive 2 recalls, you should be left alone for the rest of your term.
Anybody else?
And if you changed that 3 recall elections to 2, then your numbers change drastically on what's realistically feasible. That's my thought.
Commissioner Knight?
I like voting. I'll vote 3 times, 4 times, 5 times,
If you really like the person, you'll go to every one of the elections. If you really hate the person, you'll go to every one of the elections.
depending on, it doesn't even matter which side I'm on. I just like to vote.
Any other comments?
Okay, I don't think I quite have a majority, but I'll draft it with 2 and we can decide next time and see what we want to do. And then I skipped 6.14, if anyone has comments on that one. Looks like Ms. Knight does.
So,
Looks like Ms. Knight has a question.
Commissioner Knight?
6.14, just to clarify, shouldn't this be titled Failure of City Council to Call a Recall Election? And that has happened in the past.
Wow, did not know that had happened in the past. I don't have a problem with making that change for clarity. I'm not sure it's necessary. It's just a title. But, I wanted to change the other title because it bothered me, so I understand.
Anybody else?
I agree. I think it should say recall.
I'd be good with that.
Okay.
Okay, and then 6.15, I'm bringing up, this one's new, and I don't think we've ever used it, although there was some talk of using it last time. But it's interesting, and I just want to let you guys talk about it because there's some cumbersome requirements in here. And I don't know if that's intentional, it might be, but particularly the thing where it requires 6 affirmative votes to put the non-ballot binding ballot proposition on a ballot, but it would only take, 4 to put most propositions on the ballot. So I don't know if that was intentional. I assume it was, but I figured I'd let you talk about it in case there's something we want to change or put more thought into.
That's funny. The only note I made on, was circling that number and wondering why would we require such a high burden to just get a non-binding proposition on the ballot? The purpose of the non-binding proposition is for the council to kind of feel out the citizens and get their opinion on it. You know, why should two council members be able to get together and say, no, I don't want to hear what the citizens have to say? I'm fine with a majority on that. They're ballot propositions, and educated voters will read it and
Commissioner Knight.
I'd be okay with 5, but I think it should be a larger number, so, you know, we don't have a city council that's like, oh, I don't want to make a decision. Let's put it to the voters and see how they, you know, it's like a survey.
Sorry, I'm smiling because you just said how much you like voting.
Well, that's true, but I also want to save money. Every time we have an election, it costs us money.
I said 4 just so I could get you to 5 and we'd agree.
Oh, it's working.
Okay. Are there any other changes we want to this one? I said, I don't think we've used it yet. I know we had a conversation about it over the summer, but it did not get the requisite 6 votes to get put on the ballot.
Anybody
You-
else?
Do you remember what the proposition was?
That was on the council health insurance.
Oh, yes, okay. Pardon me while I roll my eyes.
All right, and I think that gets us through Article 6. So now we're on Article 7. And this one is a lot about the city manager and staff. But you'll see, I didn't point out a whole lot of sections in here, so I'm assuming you guys are going to stop me on quite a few of them that you want to talk about.
Let's see how you do.
So I started with 7.03. If somebody has anything on 7.01, the city manager, or 7.02. please let me
Commissioner
know.
Knight.
On 7.01, in the first paragraph, sentence 3, it says the city manager may be bonded at city expense as determined by the council and may require a bond be provided at city expense by any other employee. I think that's a run-on sentence. So in that final phrase, I'm not sure it's the city manager or the city council requiring a bond for other employees.
I believe it's the city manager, but we could
Clarify it.
clarify it if it's something that we find confusing. I personally did not find it confusing. I read it as the city manager decides if another employee has to have the bond.
I agree.
Anything else in 6.01?
7.
No? 7.01, sorry.
Just keep me online.
It's getting late.
All right, what about section 7.02? Acting manager,
Oh,
Commissioner Knight.
This is confusing, because the first sentence says the city manager may designate someone to act as city manager during his absence or illness. And then the next sentence is the council may designate a person.
So if the city manager knows that he is going into surgery, he gets to designate the acting person. If not, then it's city council. That's the way it's written.
What if if he becomes incapacitated, it's automatic?
Then it would go to council at that
Okay.
point, because there wouldn't be anybody else to name it.
Well, is that an illness?
Absence, I would assume a surgery would count as
Okay,
some sort of
but
illness
the council
or absence.
appoints if it's an absence or disability. I mean, I'm just like, just pick one.
I like the flexibility where the city manager is allowed to name who's acting when he's not available. So I don't want to take that away, but I also understand if he's so not available that it's unexpected, the council needs to be able to do it. So I'm not really sure what the balance is.
Well, and we don't know what the illness is. Is he out for a week or is he
Right.
out for 6 months?
Right.
Commissioner Walsh.
What about just during the manager's absence, period? With no explanation as to why he's absent?
Yeah, and then if the city manager is absent and has not designated somebody, then the city council can, or something along those lines.
Right.
Commissioner Walsh.
Now, if I'm remembering correctly, we now have 2 assistant city managers.
That's correct.
Is one considered to be first in line before the other, or are they co-equal?
Under the organizational chart, they're co-equal.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted to make that sure.
I think I have a simple solution, which is to, say, add to the second sentence something in the beginning to the phrase of, if the city manager is unable or fails to designate, the council may do so.
Yeah, and then also, or when the position is vacant.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
I will note that the compensation is is solely in the council section, because if the city manager designates somebody, it does not come with additional compensation. It'll be one of the assistant city managers will fill in while he's on vacation or in surgery or something along those lines.
Okay.
Okay. So I pointed out administrative departments for the same reason I pointed out several things in Article 4. It gives council power that I don't necessarily see in every other city in Texas, and I just want to point it out and see if that's the way we want to do it. So in a lot of council manager governments, the city manager will have pretty strong authority over the organization of the city, the things that go on the organizational chart, which creation of departments, that sort of thing, except to the extent that it would require some sort of budgetary appropriation, in which case it would go to city council for the budget. That's not every city, that's some cities. In some cities, they do it this way. I'm just pointing it out to see what we want to do. I'm also going to note this is the only city that I've ever seen approve personnel policies. So, at council instead of at the city manager level.
I do feel like this is one section where, yeah, this should fall squarely under city manager.
The personnel policies are all of it.
The personnel policies at the very least.
Commissioner Knight.
I can't remember what we did, but I think some of this might be in conflict with 4.04.
To the extent that it involves job duties of individual employees, it would be, this is more about the departments than the individual employees. So this would not allow council to hire and fire people, but it would allow them to eliminate a department after consulting with the city manager, which I guess would fire a lot of people, but not an individual person necessarily.
Well, it's also kind of interesting that at the beginning, it says, all of which shall be under the control and direction of the city
Yeah.
manager, except as herein provided, and then it goes in and herein it provides for everything. So
It's-
That-
I would be open to a proposal that eliminates or substantially modifies that middle sentence. It's a 3-sentence section, and I'd be interested to see what you'd propose, based on what you've seen in other cities.
yeah.
Okay. I can do some benchmarking, bring some examples.
Let me add, because you're about to move on to it, and then it goes further into section 7.04, and that middle sentence in 7.03 seems to undermine a lot of what 7.04 is about to do.
It says with the city manager's approval, they can appoint and remove their employees. So it does still give the city manager authority over some of that, but maybe we don't want it to. I'm not really sure what you're going for there.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is that middle sentence that gives council the authority to approve personnel policies, and then the next section says the department shall have a director who shall, and these are their duties, they shall supervise and control their departments. The department director can be removed or appointed or removed by the city manager without council approval, but then council can come in and meddle in their department.
And remove the entire department.
Right,
Yes.
so,
Commissioner Knight.
Yeah, the last sentence makes no sense. It says more than one department may be headed by the same person, and the city manager can head one or more. And a provision in the charter for the appointment of a department head does not require the department to be created or maintained. What are we gonna give up? I mean, fire, police?
We did give up fire. We don't have a fire department.
Well,
so.
that is true, but,
And no, we're
I
not
think
giving up the
that
police
gives
department.
the city manager too much power to do bizarre things. I've been watching too much news, okay?
Commissioner Walsh.
Well, currently, we've been adding departments within departments, it looks like, because every time I turn around, there's a new head of this, beautification, so on and so forth. And I understand they're under one department, but we've been adding a lot of people in these jobs here lately. And I was wondering how that would be affected by this.
So I don't disagree that we're adding a lot of employees. We are. City's growing. More complicated
Well, I
things to
don't
work
have
on.
anything against it yet.
Yet. I like it. So,
So if the council, just devil's advocate, if the council doesn't agree with a particular department, say the beautification department, for example, the city manager created it, staffed it, but the city council,
could choose to discontinue it under 7.03.
yep,
Right. Whereas if the city manager created it and city council didn't like that, they supervise the city manager, they can, have discussions with him to convince him that that wasn't the right idea without city council on a Tuesday deciding to terminate the entire department. But those are different ways it can be managed. I'm not telling you which way to do it. I'm just trying to show you how it would work.
Or another devil's advocate would be that city council goes and decides to, given the power that they have, to create a whole new department without,
Right, and then leave it up to the city manager to decide how or
Yeah.
when to staff it.
yeah.
It does say in 7.05 that the council can establish other departments, blah, blah, blah. But any ordinance as such shall not be adopted until the city manager has been heard and made a recommendation.
The 7.03 has the same language. They don't make changes without hearing
Yeah.
the city manager's recommendations. But if they say, and I'm going to use the most ridiculous example because we will never get rid of our police department, but if city council says, we want to get rid of our police department, and the city manager says, no, we need our police department, city council could still get rid of the police department.
I've
the way it's
seen
written.
in the news where cities have fired the entire police department.
Right. Okay, well, I consider that a ridiculous example because we would obviously never do that.
It happened here once.
I was trying to pick a ridiculous example. The state gets really mad at you if you try to defund police. There's a whole lot of laws on that now.
And I think we ought to leave the personnel policies, guidelines, and so on up to the city manager.
I'd include that in my request to see what you bring to us next
Okay.
time.
actually, I would leave it up to the HR director who's supervised by the city manager. But
We can, I'm gonna go pull some,
I tell you, okay, I agree with that because they're more trained in that than the city manager would be, I would think. Just HR would be more conversant with that, yeah.
I'm gonna pull some similar provisions from various city charters so that we can look at them and benchmark at the next meeting and see where to land on this sort of power, I don't wanna say struggle, but dichotomy.
okay.
7.05, I put it out for the same reason. I'll do some benchmarking on that one too. It's the same sort of issue. And that's my entire presentation. So who's got stuff on other provisions?
I got
Commissioner,
706.
Okay.
okay.
And this is for Diane. You were on the city council when Chief Barnett was hired, correct?
That's correct.
And he had to be confirmed by the city council, and I don't know if that was a state law or what.
Well, there was actually a committee that was formed
Okay.
of citizens, a couple council members, a few police officers, and they made the recommendation to city council.
So there's nothing in the charter
There's nothing
currently
in it.
that requires that. But the charter, it looks like it was changed in 2020, so it's possible that was removed, but I don't know. I didn't look at that. I will note that this also provides the city council will approve or has oversight over the operating procedures and strategies and I think policies of the police department. So I don't know if that's, or sorry, there it is. Police department procedures and policies shall be subject to review and modification by the city council. I don't know if we want that or not, but I did notice it was there while we were talking.
No, I don't think they should. They have done ordinances that allow the police department to like do those license plate things.
The
The
readers.
readers,
Readers, yeah.
I mean, and it does provide that data sharing, deploying resources that aim to protect all citizens, promote transparency, reduce crime,
Right.
all fairly positive things, I think. Unless we want to add language that would prevent them from doing anything
So just,
untoward.
just for clarity for Ms. Knight, were you asking to have city council confirm the police chief or?
No, I just remember there was a contentious city council vote.
there was,
On Chief Barnett specifically, okay.
yeah.
I don't, like I said, I don't know if council used to have to confirm or anything like that. I'd have to go look at the history of the provision. But currently, the way it's written, it looks like city manager would appoint.
But it doesn't say that.
It does not, but he's a department director and city manager
Well,
appoints department directors.
Maybe it could be clarified,
Okay,
so we don't have to go through that pain again.
we could state that, for clarity, do you want it appointed by the city manager and you want that clearly stated? Or do you want appointed by the city manager with confirmation by council? What do you want clearly stated?
Diane, you have experience in this.
Well, I'd have to think about it a little bit, but, I think that, well,
Can I say something?
sure.
This situation's gonna come up soon. Chief Barnett's been there now over 15 or more years with a past history in law enforcement. He and I are contemporaries in age, and there aren't a lot of law enforcement officers, not counting retired Texas Rangers who become sheriffs, but at 56, 57 years old or so, he's already got a first assistant deputy chief who we all know. And so I believe sometime in the next few years, based on all indications from what I've seen, that we're going to be looking at a new police chief. So we do need to give this some thought on how we want it done. And I'm not talking about a specific individual in mind. I'm just saying, like, a lot of things we talk about are theoretical and might have happened once 15 years ago and might not happen for another 15. But by the end of this decade, I would expect that we're gonna be looking for a new chief. And so we should be considering what we want in that process.
So I'm looking at the clock, it's almost 8 o'clock. Do we want to bring back Article 7 and discuss these last sections next meeting?
Yes,
Yes,
I do, yeah.
We can do that. I would also like to propose that perhaps we add a department, an internal auditor. Is
Okay.
this where we would do that?
Wouldn't that be
Depending how
under
you want it
financial?
appointed, but I can find some different cities that have internal auditors and we can look at that so we could figure out where best to slot it in.
I agree
Okay.
with Lila. I think it would probably go in Article 8 under finance.
Okay.
I'm not sure, because if it's appointed by council, it might go in Article 4, where it has
Okay.
council appointments, so we'd have to look at how we want to appoint that position. But if I could pull from several cities that have internal auditors,
I think
that might
we're,
have charter provisions.
yeah, I just think we're getting bigger. It might be something to consider.
Okay,
All right. is
Well, and actually, Section 8, just flipping ahead, Section 8.13 says independent audit under finance. So
Yeah, we
if
could-
you think it belongs in 4 or 7,
it might belong in 8.
Or
we-
8.
We can look at it.
we can look at it next week.
So I think we should, I guess, go ahead and have the public hearing real quick, and then we can,
Okay, it is 8 PM. I will open up the public hearing for the Charter Review Commission. Seeing none, no one wishing to speak, I will close the public hearing at a little after 8 o'clock. Okay, our next meeting is
2 weeks.
2 weeks, March 24th,
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
March 24th.
We'll bring back the rest of Article 7 and at least Article 8.
So
Article
rest of
eight's
7 and
pretty-
8.
Article 8's pretty thick and
Yeah.
important.
Yes, very important. Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
All right.
Hey, can I borrow